Well, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you're calling in from today. I'd like to welcome you to today's NACo EDGE webinar, where we will focus on the top 10 economic outlook, a mid-year update. And this is a webinar that is highly anticipated. I know personally I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I'm thrilled to welcome Joe Rulison, the CEO of 3+one, and also Steve Acquario, the Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties. So welcome, gentlemen, and we're pleased to welcome everyone from around the country today for this NACo webinar. My name is Kyle Klein. I serve as Director of Financial Partnerships for the NACo EDGE, and we work closely with 3+one as a NACo endorsed partner. And really, our mission is to support America's counties through innovative solutions and revenue generating, cost saving services. And that's exactly what the 3+one program provides for counties all around the country. So really grateful for that partnership and grateful for these gentlemen who are taking time out of their very busy days and their very busy summers to be with us. So just want to invite you. We will take questions throughout. So we'll probably save those for the very end of the webinar, but please feel free to submit those via the chat and the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring those questions, and we'll be happy to get to as many of those as we possibly can. And we'll also be following up after today's webinar with some more information and allow you to be in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you and love to share more as well. So again, thank you all for your time. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to our speakers for today's presentation. So take it away.
Kyle, thank you very much. My name is Stephen Acquario, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York Association of Counties, celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2025 in partnership with the National Association of Counties. And today, I'm joined by my good friend, Joseph Rulison, the CEO of 3+one. Joe, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks so much, Steve. I greatly appreciate it. And Kyle, thank you as well. We love our relationship with NACo EDGE, and also with NYSAC. So really appreciate it, Steve.
Really grateful to the National Association of Counties and to NACo EDGE for bringing this financial webinar to the counties of America today. Joe, I'm really glad that I've met you, and I appreciate your knowledge, your experience, and your enthusiasm that you bring to your work every day. You know, NACo has a high-performance leadership academy that was supported by the late Colin Powell. And the general was fond of saying, "You bring your own weather." Well, your weather is always sunny and fantastic, Joe, and I like that about you. And another famous quote by General Colin Powell is, "Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier." And you are indeed an optimist, and we need that attitude. Let's get to it. We're going to need some of that optimism with the financial markets, Joe. Keep those bulls running, as they would say. Before I turn it over to you, let's take a look back. In March of 2022, just 2 years ago, hard to imagine, 0 interest rate on our cash, counties' cash investments. To address the rising inflation, which peaked at 9%, the Federal Reserve started the process of raising rates. Your analysis over these past 2 years was spot on. You're batting 1,000, as they say, for our baseball fans. Today, we're again joined by Joseph Rulison, the CEO of 3+one. Today, we're going to talk about navigating the future of public finance, the 2024 top 10 economic outlooks. This is a mid-year 2024 update. Joe, the floor is yours. Tell us what we need to know, and I hope everyone is listening, because they should pay attention to what you're going to say over the next 20 minutes. Joe Rulison.
Steve, thank you so much. And again, with the partnership with NACo EDGE, and also NYSAC. But, with all the different associations, state associations that involved with counties, can't tell you how much we appreciate all the work that we do with you. And to bring this outlook to you, I think is extremely important from the standpoint that it is a different type of an approach that I've used that rarely can you be able to say publicly that you're batting 1,000. I wish there were such baseball cards I could sign. But with it being the case is that I think the reason why been very fortunate with the outlook from 2022 to 23 into 24 is that it's been spent a lot of time listening to what's going on Main Street, to listen to what the people are saying, not to what the pundits or what's coming out of Washington. And I say that because you're going to hear a theme coming throughout that's going to be called disconnect. And that is what is perceived to be the case versus what the reality is. And my approach is to go out and to really get a sense of what's actually happening. And I have mentioned this before in the past that when my wife, who loves to shop, she'll go and shop, and then she'll put me in a seat and say, "Don't move, you just stay right there." And I just watch and see what people are buying, and I can tell what the buying approaches are. I can tell why retail, is it doing well? Is it not? Is it the upper end of retail? Is it the lower end of retail? And at the same point, being a treasurer of a water authority, of a public entity, as you all are, involved with public life, you see what the pressures are that are coming onto you day in and day out that affect both how you operate, but also how that's going to affect the tax base of those that you're working with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and give you some guidance of what I'm seeing right now in the rest of 2024. And I think it's really accurate. And it's going to be accurate all the way to the end of 24. So I continue to ask you to please pay attention to why the value of this information is so important, because it's going to make a difference to your bottom line. Every dollar you have has value, and that means it can bring added revenue to your budget. And at the same point, ways to just keep an outlook on making sure you're not getting brought into ways of thinking that might cause you to take some actions that you don't need to take. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my top 10, and I'm going to go really quickly through each of these areas as to what I believe is the trends that are still pertinent today. First of all, my first one is the value of each dollar is still $1.05. Interest rates are going to continue, and I've been saying this, interest rates are going to continue to be pretty close where they are right now for the remainder of the year. I do not expect rate decreases. I think the Fed had made some major mistakes earlier in the year to suggest that we think the economy is going to soften and we're going to do some cuts in interest rates. That perceived into the market that that's what's going to happen. And as a result, every time the Fed meets, the market says they're going to cut rates, or they're going to try to push the Fed into thinking the rate should be cut. Well, I have to tell you that I just don't think the elements are in place and the factors are in place for the Fed to take that position. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. But just keep in mind, every dollar you have, just imagine to know by the end of the year, it's worth $1.05. So as you can say right now, you're going to have another 2.5% between now and the end of the year with every dollar you have. That's 2.5%. On top of the 2.5% from the beginning of the year, that's going to be able to go right back into your coffers to help alleviate pressures that you might have in a budget. And as you're planning into next year, I put out a blog last week. I believe that if you can budget 5%, go ahead and budget it. The reason why I'm saying that is because you have 5% right now to push and to take some of your cash and put it out and lock it into 5.5% right now. So if interest rates do come down a little bit into next year, you're going to still have that cushion. I don't expect a big decrease into 2025. I will get into why I think it might, but I'm just saying overall, you're going to be able to still get most of your money to 5% if you're proactive of knowing where your money is, knowing how long you have it and how long you can push it out for. But you should have enough to push it out into 2025, especially with the ARPA monies. You have to dedicate them by the end of this year, but you have the ability to have those dollars till 2026, the end of 26. Just imagine you can put that money and stage it out and be able to earn 5% for the next 2 years on those dollars. When it comes to the next point, inflation, I will continue to say inflation is not dead. I was just mentioning to Steve and to Kyle previously that I'm sorry, but I just love food. And I love my McDonald's and I love my Dunkin' Donuts. And I went up to the window the other day and I got a large coffee and an egg McMuffin, and I couldn't believe the price of it. It was like $11. And I'm like, what am I missing here? Then I went back and checked. And in the case of the last 5 years, that combination of an egg McMuffin and a coffee went up 141%. The price of a car in the last 2 years went up 32%. So this idea that Washington's telling you, inflation's coming under control, it is not. I have to tell you that I still say it's going to be above the 2% for the Fed. I think that when you're looking right now and seeing that healthcare premiums are talking about a 25% increase, you're also seeing it. I'm on the Water Authority, and we continue to have chemicals coming in that are showing over 10%. I still think there's enough pressure. While Washington's saying, we've got control of inflation, the Fed's saying, well, we're getting there. You and I know that when we go to the grocery store or we go to the restaurant, we're seeing much higher costs. And even though you had wholesale prices that came in a little bit tame last week, keep in mind, those are prices before they get to retail. And therefore, there's costs that are built up, such as wages and all the other factors that go into being able to bring it to the table, that is having major price pressures, that it's going to continue to keep inflation up there. So I'm saying I don't think that in 2024, and I think in the 25, inflation is going to continue to still be a concern. And the Fed may say, well, we'll not have to necessarily hit the 2% just because if they are worried about the next part. And that is where you have the concern of, is there going to be a recession? I said there are a lot of pundits saying there was going to be a recession in 2024. There's not, there hasn't been, and there's not going to be. And I'm so bold to say in 25, we're not going to see a recession either. I do think you'll see some softening that will be a little bit of anemic type of economy. But overall, there's still a lot of money. There's still a lot of money that has to be spent. That's not going to put us in a recession, but there'll be, I think, pressures on the Fed to maybe ease up a little bit on rates into 2025, but there will not be a recession. As I said in my blog last week, I think in 25, maybe you'll see short-term rates go to 4.25, 4.5. But keep in mind, you still have it above 5%. Use that now. And knowing you're not going to have a recession, that's going to put you in a good spot for going into 2025. The next point is that the labor unions are still having great success out in the market. You continue to hear of companies that are going to have labor votes. And I keep saying this because labor unions are on the move. They continue to be, and they continue to be successful. And what that means is they're also having success in terms of guaranteeing higher wages for their workers, which means that's going to be very tough when it comes time to have to negotiate. And it's also going to put greater pressure on the budgets because of where wages are going. So I continue to say that this is going to be a major factor going forward. Now, people say, well, are you worried about retail sales because of there's a softening? And I'm saying, well, the wages are increasing. There's still more money out there. I continue to say the retail sales are going to hold their own. And part of that is because of these higher wages that you're seeing, where minimum wages gone up, unions have negotiated higher wages. And in order to keep employees where they are for retention, you're seeing higher than average wage increases as well. I come to the clean energy and green energy. I'll continue to say this, another big disconnect. Washington wants you to go electric. The consumer is saying, no, we're not buying electric. And that has been a really big, I think, a disconnect between what the pundits are saying and what they want you to believe versus what the economic realities are of being able to do green energy policy. Green energy policy is extremely expensive. Am I pro climate? Absolutely. But the cost that's out there is enormous. And that's starting to catch up with consumers saying, wait, not so fast. You have a number of school districts that are saying, look, have electric buses throughout. There's no way we can, in fact, put that kind of money into the infrastructure to buy and build EV stations, let alone the buses that would be able to be utilized and have the kind of daily use to be able to be efficient and effective of taking students back and forth to school. So what a lot of the school districts are doing, they're putting these into their budgets. And you know what? They're being voted down because the public's saying, wait, we can't afford it, and it doesn't seem to make sense. And we surely, especially up here in the Northeast where you get cold weather, we don't want our kids to be on a bus that all of a sudden is out of energy, it's out of electricity, and the kids are there in the cold in the middle of nowhere because of there's no charging stations. So there's a lot of these kind of issues that are coming up. And my belief is that you're going to find that hybrid will become extremely popular and is continuing to be more popular. The EV vehicles are not doing so well in sales. Toyota has abandoned the EV and is going 100% hybrid. You also have today, Warren Buffett just pulled back one of his major holdings on EV as well. So I'm just saying, while it's important, the real realities of what the cost of going green is going to have major impact and is going to shift the way that this is going to be addressed in the future. The next big one that I have to continue to say is the regional banks. The regional banks, as we had in 2023, where we had some banks who were on the brinks and had to be taken over, continues to be a real watch on the regional banks. One, because they tend to have a very strong holdings in commercial property. And as we know, commercial properties have had somewhat of pressures on them because of the post-COVID reaction of individuals not wanting to go back to work or doing hybrid working. And as a result, a lot of the different commercial buildings are not having the kind of occupancy that they need to sustain the kind of cost, which is putting some pressure on the regional banks. So regional banks are going to continue to have to be smart. You're going to see consolidation. And I continue to hear there's a number of mergers and consolidations in the works. And this is something I think will be very important and continues to be in the forefront. The next big trend that you find is with the rating agencies. The rating agencies have really stepped it up on a couple levels. One, because of what they had with Silicon Valley and with some of the other banks last year, and because of where overall I think the public is for how are the public entities doing. Rating agencies are being tough. They're out there more, and they're using liquidity analysis to really gauge on how strong are you actually operating and what kind of money do you have going in the future. And as a result, you're seeing that the rating agencies are looking at different aspects. And that's why we continue to say, make sure you have liquidity analysis so that you can show them the strength. It represents 10% of your rating. It can change your outlook from a negative to a positive, or even change you up a full grade based on having that kind of information. But the rating agencies are being very active, and you can continue. They're going to excellent organizations and ones that we're finding they're doing a great job. The next is the stresses of the immigration flux. Just last week in Texas, they were talking about that the school districts are having tremendous stress on themselves, given the number of students that are, the flux is coming into the school districts with this surge of immigration. That is happening not only to the school districts, but as we've heard, to the major cities that have had high immigration levels that have put a lot of pressure on housing, on food, on the healthcare. All of this continues to be stresses and something that we continue to monitor very closely. And this is something that's going to continue into 2025. Part of it that's going to be important is to make sure that with the immigration coming in, that those that can work have the greatest access and a very good path of getting jobs where they in fact can start earning money, so they can help ease some of the pressure by this flux of immigration. The next. Colleges and universities. There were 14 colleges and universities in 2023 that had to close. That is one a month. I was just talking to somebody the other day, and they said that's now one a week that you're seeing. Part of this is because there's a change in terms of the number of students that are going to college. The idea of what the cost is to go to college and university has been very much into the press, and the cost of going and the cost of covering a 4-year tuition is something that's been very much top of mind. We are seeing a research coming back to the community colleges for that reason, and also with the trades and technical trades, we're seeing a shift with the community colleges. But keep in mind, as I had mentioned before, there was a fact where you had a lower base of students from 2008, 2009 financial crisis. The couples did not have kids for those 2 years. And that flux today is being felt through colleges and universities. And so you're having a different kind of student. You're having to have colleges think differently, and you're seeing consolidation so that the infrastructure has to be consolidated. And those entities that are very specific with what they offer and what they have in terms of programs is very sensitive. The other part that you have is with some of the controversies that have occurred onto the university type campuses, that has also put some pressure on the shifting of where individuals want to go to school. So as a result, a lot of things are going on in the higher ed world, and one that we continue to monitor. And I said this was going to be a trend that's going to continue to 24, and in fact that it has. The next is the type of student and the type of workers. I've said before, and it's interesting, I was just talking to a public entity, and they said they just hired new workers that were over 55 years old, 3. And I said, that is your new type of worker. The individuals that have retired, that are looking to continue on to a new career, continue to help supplement the retirement. And the reason why it's so important is that, as I'd mentioned before, in colleges and universities, there has to be greater training of going into public service. The millennials and Generation Z individuals do not tend to have a lot of interest towards public service. That's something we have to start back even right into grammar school. But right now, I'm saying that the new kind of worker for certification, different types of programs that could help boost the colleges, these individuals right here, 55 to 75 years old, that want to be able to serve in the public, need some new type of certifications. But I have to tell you, incredible workers that have a discipline and a passion, and you know that you're going to have them for the next 10 to 20 years. So I'm excited about this because I continue to say that this is something that can help fill one of the biggest challenges for public entities right now in terms of finding new workers to fill the voids that you do have. 2 guarantees that I had said at the end of last year in December is that, first of all, 2024 was going to be one of the most unpredictable years of modern times. Well, I'm telling you, it's doing exactly that. I can't tell you what to expect given the presidential elections coming up. I would never have expected that you would have the direction that things are going right now. And I can tell you, it's still very unpredictable. And there's so many things that are going to happen. This is something we're just going to have to wait. And I don't think anybody's going to know the outcome until the end of the year. The other guarantee that I have is that cash is king, and it remains king. Keep in mind, every single dollar you have is $1.05. And if you've got that money, please put it to work. It cannot sit there dormant. There was an article in GovTech, a governing magazine, just over a week ago that over $375 billion of public funds are still in dormant accounts, not earning any money whatsoever. That is something that you just have to imagine. Keep in mind the amount of money that could be earned on those dollars could go right back into the budget and help your taxpayers, help meet budget gaps, help pay for technology, help for raises, help for new positions, help for new emergency care for frontline workers. All of that means that if you have the cash, you can make a lot of money from that as a new source of revenue and generate for easing the tax basis. So with that, Steve, I went through really quick in terms of what we have of the outlook for 24, where we are mid-year, and the guarantees that I continue to stick by.
Well, you did, Joe. And I feel like, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers feel like we just did a whole semester of college in 20 minutes. You did an outstanding job, again, talking about giving us your economic forecast, the value of that dollar. You're noting it's $1.05, inflation, inflationary trends, noting that it is going to remain unusually high, above that 2% goal of the Fed, currently around 3.5%, down from a high of 9%. You talked about the Federal Reserve and its actions. You talked about green energy, the directive from Washington, and how consumers are reacting to that, and the rating agencies' approaches. Let me ask you this question while we're on that slide right there. Cash will remain king. Let's talk about liquidity a little bit more and why liquidity is important. In my mind, what I've seen in the counties of New York and talking with other counties around the United States and other state association directors is understanding where the cash is sitting. And it's often could be put to use in a more productive way than it currently is. Can you talk a little bit about liquidity and how that can help generate additional interest income for the counties?
Absolutely, Steve. A lot of times more cash is left on the sidelines for just in case I need it. And what then happens is that money will sit into accounts that you don't realize is money that's sitting off to the side that you just sort of forget about. And that's money that you've got to pay attention to. Just keep in mind, if they're saying right now inflation is at 3.4%. And yet you can earn 5.25, 5.5 on your cash. Think of that. You can offset your inflation costs. And on top of that, you've got additional dollars to help offset your tax levy. Both of those really show the value of what that cash is. And the issue that you have, public entities have a lot of bank relationships, and within that are embedded a lot of bank accounts, and enabled to collect all that information and have one picture, and then be able to say, how long am I going to have that cash for? Am I going to be able to meet my needs? If I am, what am I going to do with that money that I don't need, and to make sure it's put to work? And when I do need, I know it's still there, but you just want to make sure every single dollar is put to work, because it's not your dollars, it's not my dollars, it's the taxpayers' dollars that we've got to worry about. And anything we can do to ease the burden for them going forward, because as much as you're feeling the pressure, as much they're feeling the pressure, anything we can do to make their life easier. Liquidity allows you to capture that, to have the power and confidence of knowing that that money can be put to work. And just imagine that impact can have cash itself, and to know you're not taking any risk, you're staying liquid, you're staying safe, but you're really capturing as much yield as possible to make the difference for your community.
Joe, a couple of areas I've seen in that regard is health insurance trusts, workers' compensation reserves, unemployment reserves, and other types of reserves that traditionally have not been properly invested or taking advantage of this new interest rate cycle. So thank you for giving me that explanation on liquidity. Very helpful. I've got two other questions that I've seen come in, and then we'll go to Kyle to see if there's others that have come in from the into the chat line. You mentioned inflation. We've been talking about inflation peaking at around 9. The Fed Reserve careful not to adjust those interest rates until inflation is better in check, say at 2% level. Let's talk about inflation and the price of goods, price levels. You mentioned to me earlier automobile costs. You mentioned the cost of an Egg McMuffin and a cup of coffee and other trend factors. You and I had the great pleasure of meeting an egg farmer. And this egg farmer talked about his business and how he was not interested in raising the price of his dozen eggs. He did not want to raise them. He knew what people could afford, and he was happy to have that certain cost for a dozen eggs. Can you share your thoughts on inflation and price levels and related to that egg farmer?
What's amazing, Steve, is the farmer we're having the conversation with was saying, look, I don't want to raise prices. And it's the same thing being on the water authority. We don't want to raise prices, but when you look, we just had a rate study done, and the individual that came in did an amazing job, and he gives us a 5-year outlook. And he's saying, your 5-year outlook is a 6.5% increase because of the cost to deliver the infrastructure, the aging infrastructure, the chemicals. They were even talking about a truck that we'd usually buy for 30,000 is now 50,000. And so the farmer was saying all the things that it takes for me to produce that egg from the chicken and get it to the market for somebody to buy. I don't want to increase it, but I'm now realizing in order to just stay even, I'm going to have to increase my prices by over 40%. 40%. Because of the fact of just being able to keep his head above water to bring that to the public. Those are the kind of pressures, Steve, that, we only see at the end in terms of as the consumer, but everything that goes in between. And that's why when I look at what the wholesale price is to what the retail price is, there's a whole big disconnect there as well. And it's one that I continue to worry about. And I think there's some pressures that are going to continue there for a while that we just have to be cognizant of. And it's not going to be Wall Street or the market saying, you got to cut rates just to cut rates. The Fed's got to be responsible to know you're holding it so that you can contain the inflation, because the growth is still going to be there. While it won't be as aggressive and as good as it has been, it still will be there. Retail sales will hold on and our wages will be there. So I still think there's reason that we could hold rates for a while where they are and still not go into any kind of a recessionary type of issue, Steve.
Let's talk about retail sales, automobiles, electronics, hotel, motel, entertainment, the internet purchases. These contribute to the overall sales tax revenue, really an important component of the economy, retail sales. Can you share with our viewers here your thoughts about trends in retail sales? Are we going to ultimately return to pre-COVID levels of year-over-year increases? We have been experiencing 4 or 5% growth. Some are saying that growth is going to recheck itself back to about 3% or so, or pre-COVID levels. What are your thoughts about retail sales?
I agree, Steve. They will be positive, but they will be more modest. I think that 2.5%. I know that I sit on the Visit Rochester board, and we were just going through the hotel tax, and we had our best year ever, 2.5% above last year. Right. And you will see some increase in sales tax given what the cost is going to be for fuel. And one quick thing, Steve, there is a energy tax that has not hit yet in New York yet for gasoline. It's going to be 70 cents a gallon. Now, how can you fight inflation if you're going to take gas up another 70 cents, even though it's going to be used for climate control and green energy purposes? Those are the things you just have to make sure that you don't put us in the wrong position. But overall, I do think the higher end retails continue to do well. It's interesting. You're starting to see Walmart, you're starting to see where Target are trying to do some price checks to have bring consumers back and to see that they're buying. The one market that continues to do well, which is interesting, is TJ Maxx, for example, and home goods. Things of that sort where people are paying because they think they're getting great value and they've got a great product. And the areas that are hurting a little bit are the Dollar Generals and the lower end where people are just finding hard to meet ends. And so as a result, we're having some balancing there. And I think it's not going to be quite the growth that we have seen in the past, but I think we'll bring it to pre-COVID where we see a little bit of it's being more in the single digit and the lower single digits for the growth. And that's why I don't think we're going to go into recession, but I do think it'll be a little bit anemic going into 2025, which
Okay,
will put pressure on the Fed.
so the Federal Reserve meets again in July, September, November, and December. Let's hope that these interest rates remain. On the one hand, let's hope that they remain high. On the other hand, it's because of higher inflation or higher cost of goods. So it's this balancing act that the Federal Reserve is undertaking on all of our behalf. The last takeaway here from this webinar here today is if you're not earning at least 5%, you really should be looking to position your assets to take advantage of these higher interest rates. That's all that I have on my end that I can see. Let's go to Kyle Klein and see if we have any other questions that may have come in. And then if there are none, we'll go to Joe Rulison to conclude. Kyle?
Thank you so much, Steve. And Joe, insightful analysis as always in helping us understand the economic outlook and the landscape and the trends that are impacting us. I do have one question that came in. When you have counties looking at liquidity, related to liquidity, what are some of the strategies and what does it take to develop a action plan regarding liquidity? What are the things that they need to be implementing or the strategies they need to be putting in place for a plan?
Great question, Kyle. My first answer would be they should be using CashVest by 3+1 because we look at all dollars. We look at every single dollar that goes through an entity. And what does that dollar mean in terms of the flow from the public entity through the banks to the receiver, to the receiver, to the banks, to the public entity? Keep in mind what cash you see internally. Once you write a check or once you see a payment go out, that's not the end of your cash. It's a whole cycle that it goes through. So liquidity plays a big part. And you have to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence to know that that cash is going to be needed and there when you need it, in whether today or tomorrow or 6 months from now. But more importantly, when you have that data, you can look out to the future and you can look out and see, what is my future picture going to look like for liquidity out in 6 months, in 9 months? That means you can put that money out. You can capture what the value of that cash is short-term and long-term. Right now, you have great opportunity that your short-term dollars can capture 5% or above. At the same point, longer term, you can now lock in. So you have dollars that are locked in for the next couple years or more for over 5%. What a great spot to be able to be in and to know that, well, if I lock it in now, rates are going to go a lot higher. I don't think they're going to go a lot higher. Just how long are they going to stay here and how are they going to start to drift back at some point? So that is the importance of knowing your liquidity, having the data, and knowing that you look at the time horizon that you have. But more importantly, this is what the rating agencies are looking for. And if you have that for your rating agencies, if you have it for in case of audit, but more importantly, you have this information for your taxpayers as they're asking, are you using your fiduciary responsibility to see every single dollar is being put to work? You can have confidence in saying absolutely. And that's exactly what we do at CashVest by 3+1. And we love working with counties throughout the country. And right now we're at over $2.4 billion that we've brought back to local communities that never would have been realized if it was not for our liquidity management services. So we're thrilled about that. Again, keep in mind, I love the economy. I love hearing what people have to say on Main Street because Main Street drives what is really out there. And it's important that those are the ones that you're serving. And that's why we find it so important in bringing these insights to you. So, Kyle, I hope that answers your question.
It does. Very helpful, Joe. And there was a follow-up question that came in while you were speaking as well. What are some of the tangible outcomes of the Cash Fest program? You know, that some counties have been able to realize, you know, what are some of the specific outcomes with that program?
You know, we have a video. That's a great question. And we have a video that just came out by Judge Executive Gary Moore from Boone County, Kentucky, in which he said, look, in the last year alone, I made $3.8 million that I never would have made had it not been for doing this liquidity management. And he goes, altogether, I think it was over $5.8 million that we've made since the beginning of the program. Says that's $5.8 million I don't have to ask for from taxpayers to pay for county services. And you have every single entity across the board. We have down in I think it is a city in South Carolina has made over $24 million on their cash, $24 million over the last 6 years. That is significant. So it's really just keeping in mind that every single dollar that may just be there, they're recognizing and knowing that it has tangible results right back. And on average, our entities see somewhere of about a 5 to 7% of their tax levy is taken care of by just the reserves, interest earned on the reserves that they have. So the impact's significant. And if you go on our website, which is 3+one, all words, .us, you'll see right there all the story after stories after stories of the counties and of the towns, of the school districts, of the higher ed institutions that have benefited because of this. And it's all been with that partnership with NACo and NACo EDGE and with the state associations that we've been able to bring this all together for you.
That's great, Joe. I've got one more to get to. How are the counties deploying that new interest income? What are you seeing? You know, there are a lot of different priorities. Of course, you mentioned ARPA dropping off. I think counties are concerned about reserves now. You know, moving forward, how are counties utilizing that new revenue?
In a lot of ways, they're sort of setting up for when ARPA leaves. You know, a great opportunity. Every dollar you earn on ARPA right now is money that can go right back to your entity for any purpose outside of pension payments. But a lot of it is being used to offset inflation. A lot of it's being used to meet budget gaps, emergency services, technology. One of the biggest things is the gap in personnel, having to find personnel and then having to pay up to bring the kind of talent in to help bring those resources back to the public entities. But I have to tell you, there are dozens and dozens of ways that money is being used that is having huge impact that we're seeing. One of the biggest things we're going to have is health benefits. The health benefits, we're seeing double-digit increases going into 2025. And that's part of the inflation. But just keep in mind, because public entities have one of the biggest reasons why people come to public entities is for the retirement, also the benefits. Those benefits have to be matched in terms of how do you pay for those as a public entities. These kind of dollars can be used to offset those kind of dollars. So it's important to know that your cash can really make a difference and have huge impact while you're having pressures from other sides that this helps alleviate it.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. And that's the last question for me. Closing remarks from our speakers.
Well, I'll just say, Joe, again, thank you for what you have done, your attitude on financial technology and how to incorporate that and make it easy to understand for those of us that don't work exclusively in finances each and every day. You have made it easy to understand. You've taught us the value of the dollar and how to best harness those interest rates, and also given us a great crystal ball to look at. And as we look back over these last few years, you've earned Americans millions and millions and millions of dollars, perhaps billions of dollars with your thoughtful advice. I want to say thank you on behalf of NACo and NACo EDGE and the New York Association of Counties and all the state associations. We are indeed in debt to you for your advice, and thank you very much. I'll give you last word.
Steve, thank you so much. And Kyle, thank you so much. And to each of you, being a public official myself, I know where you stand. And what we've done is we've created services that have been created by public officials, public finance officials for public finance officials. And at the same point, we understand the pressures that you have. Just know that the economy, everything we're seeing right now, I think is still extremely positive, and we have great opportunity in front of us. We just want to make sure you're seizing that opportunity to make the most of it. And I'm very excited about what still lies ahead. As I said, it's going to be a very unpredictable rest of the year. I don't know what to expect between now and then. So far, we're batting 1,000. I'm hoping that we continue to bat 1,000. I feel really good about the advice that I gave you. And I think it's going to set up for a very exciting 2025. But it's because of all of you. I just want to thank you for everything you do day in and day out to help serve those that we serve, and that's the public. And want to thank you, and thank you, Steve, and thank NACo for this great opportunity.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate NYSAC and all that you do each and every day. Joe, really appreciate the partnership with 3+1. Thank you for being here, and would like to thank all of the attendees for being here today. Watch your email. You'll receive an email, and we'd love to be in touch with any other questions you may have as a follow-up. But we wish you well and wish you a great summer. Thank you all.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.